Hello and welcome to the Manga Spotlight. Today's series, The Unwritten Rules of Romantic Comedy and Monster Extermination. And this series is written by Kamishiro Tsutomu and TMS Lab. I have not been able to find any kind of information on TMS Lab. I tried to look it up, and the closest thing I can find is TMS Entertainment, which is a Japanese anime studio known for doing Detective Conan and Lupin the Third, as well as some other series. So I don't know if this is like a series that's being written by Kamishiro as well as a studio. But yeah, they're the ones involved with the writing, and the artwork is done by Mike Kie. And there is very little information on this series. The series does not have a My Anime list. It has very little information on manga updates. In fact, it just says that the year that this came out was 2023, but it has no list of like what magazine it was serialized in. It has very little information. In fact, as you can see from here, the Manga Dex page doesn't even have an English description for the summary, for the premise. Yeah, very little information about this series out there. But it is a series that just recently got translated, or fan translated, I should say, a week ago. And at the time of this recording, it already has 12 chapters. Obviously, this is a series that has been out for a while, so the 2023 makes sense. But when in 2023, I got no idea. So the best way to explain this series would be it's about a shy schoolgirl who gets transported 50 years into the past at random moments where she finds herself becoming a giant and having to battle kaijus. And then after that, she gets transported back to her present day. That's basically it. So let's break this down even more. Our main character is named Tsubura. Tsubura is a 16-year-old high school girl. She is very shy, very easily embarrassed. She has only one friend named Anna, and she has a crush on one of her classmates named Shou. And Shou is a huge fan of this series called Justice Nova. And Justice Nova is pretty much this universe's version of Ultraman. It's a series that came out 50 years ago about a superhero who turns giant to fight kaijus. So basically Ultraman. And it turns out that Tsubura, her grandfather, Hideo Enjo, used to be the director for Justice Nova. Not only was he the director, but he was also the creator. And he passed away, and so his the rights to the series and all that stuff went down to his daughter, Tsubura's mother. So she currently holds the rights to the Justice Nova series. And Tsubura has no idea on how to talk to Shou. She has a huge crush on him, but she is just too shy, too timid to approach him. And even Anna's like, well, why don't you mention the fact that your grandfather is the creator of his favorite series? And she's like, I can't do that. That's too embarrassing, especially since I've never seen them. Like, even though her grandfather created the series, she's never watched the series herself. So we just get to see a little bit more about Tsubura's life. She goes to a dojo where she works on judo, and she's been doing this for years. But even after 10 years of doing judo, she's still very weak. Yeah, basically we're setting up the fact that this is a character that doesn't make for very good hero qualities. And so Tsubura decides, you know what, maybe I'll go check out some of grandfather's things. So she walks around her house where there's a bunch of Justice Nova stuff, everything from all the action figures to all the mangas and books based off of it, all the videotapes based off of the figures. And eventually at one point, this box falls and there's this weird bracelet. And she's wondering, oh, is this part of the merchandise too? Like, this looks kind of cute. And she decides to put it on, and she starts practicing like transforming poses. And at one point, her mom walks in and says, oh, doesn't that suit you well? That's the Justice Ring. And she says, oh, don't worry. I was actually planning on giving you that for your next birthday. There's something that I want to talk to you about. And she's like, a part-time job? And her mom's like, monster extermination. And Tsubura's like, what? What the hell does that mean? When all of a sudden her bracelet starts flashing, and her mom's like, well, I'll explain everything later. And then Tsubura teleports. She disappears. And when she wakes up, she's a giant, and she's standing in front of a kaiju. And she's just like, what the hell is going on? She like starts looking around, and she's like, everything seems off. This feels like a miniature world. And is that person across from me, is that someone wearing a costume? It looks very well made. And then that's when she hears someone yelling, like, what are you standing around for? Attack that thing. And she looks down and she sees her grandfather. She's like, wait a second. How can my grandfather be here? He's dead. Not only is he here, but he looks a lot younger. And that's when she realizes that somehow she is 50 years in the past. And then that's when we see like jet fighters show up and start shooting at the creature. And her grandfather's basically yelling at her to battle the monster. Tsubura is hesitant to fight it at first, but eventually she tries. She is very weak. Basically, she's not doing any damage. The monster is like biting at her elbow and stuff, and Tsubura's not able to do anything. She's like, man, this sucks. Like, this was my favorite school uniform. I'm giant. People can see up my skirts. Nothing about this is fun. And I guess this kind of just gets her pissed off to the point where she's able to do a judo throw on the kaiju and knocks him down. And then she notices that her bracelet is flashing, and she shoots a beam at the kaiju and blows it up. And then all of a sudden she teleports away, and she finds herself back in her room, and she's wondering if this was all a dream. And she sees that her mom is watching a video on an old video film reel. And on the video it says directed by Hideo Enjo, and her mom's crying, saying, wow, Tsubura, that was your first starring role. It was the best. And she's like, starring role? And she looks and she sees herself on the screen. And so that's when she finds out that her battle was filmed in 1972 and turned into a episode of Justice Nova. And as the story progresses, basically the mom, who now owns the rights to Justice Nova and all the properties, is basically telling the world that she has found some of her grandfather's lost tapes, like lost episodes. And the episodes are moments of Tsubura transporting herself into the past to fight kaiju. So yeah, it's very, very weird and kind of convoluted, but the basic gist is Tsubura is in our present day. She has a Justice Ring bracelet. At random moments, the bracelet will teleport her 50 years into the past, into the year 1972, where she will fight a giant kaiju for a few minutes. After she defeats the giant kaiju, she gets teleported back to her present day, and her battle that was recorded 50 years ago gets released as a lost episode. And the weirdness continues with the fact that people are watching these lost tapes and nobody notices that it's Tsubura. So whatever clothes Tsubura is wearing when she gets teleported into the past are the clothes that she has when she fights the kaiju. She doesn't have like a suit like Justice Nova does. At one point she gets teleported in the past wearing her school uniform. So on the videotape, she's in her school uniform. At one point, she's wearing a judo attire, and so she's wearing her judo gi. At one point, she's wearing pajamas, and no one is able to like notice that this is Tsubura. And I'm just kind of wondering, are people seeing different things than reality? Does her grandfather see a schoolgirl fighting monsters, or does he see some random alien in a suit? When he films her, is it actually Tsubura that we're seeing on the tape, or are we seeing someone in the suit mimicking Tsubura's actions? So basically, Tsubura is Tsubura, but everyone else sees her as some other figure. I wish the series would kind of explain that, because otherwise it's just very weird how nobody is able to notice, hey, this giant girl from the 1972 looks exactly like Tsubura. No one questions it whatsoever. In fact, we have moments where they're not even sure if it's a girl or not. At least Shou is like, look at this new hero. I think it might be a female. And it's like, dude, it's a giant girl in a schoolgirl outfit. Of course it's a female. Why are you struggling to realize if it's a female or not? Is it maybe because he's seeing someone in a suit with feminine features? Maybe that could be it. But this is just like one of the confusing things that I wish was better explained. Like, what is it that people see when she's in the past? Do they see her, or do they see something else? Because another thing that happens is when she's trying to communicate with people in the past, no one can understand her. So like when she's trying to talk to the director, or she's trying to talk to her grandfather, they hear a weird alien language. They don't actually hear her speaking. Or at least they don't hear her speaking Japanese. They can't make out what words she's using. So I'm wondering if maybe what we see Like we're seeing Tsubura in the past, but we're just seeing her in the past as the readers so we can better make sense of what's going on. But the people themselves are seeing someone else. They're seeing Justice Nova. Yeah, it's basically a series where Tsubura is trying to balance being randomly teleported into the past and fighting giant kaijus, as well as just trying to live a normal school life and trying to get closer to Shou, but having to overcome her own embarrassment and nervousness to do that. At some point, Anna becomes aware of the fact that Tsubura is being teleported into the past, and Anna is very familiar with Justice Nova, and Anna is a more like level-headed character, so she basically becomes Tsubura's sidekick. She's the one that's like, okay, I'll help you out, I'll prep you. When Tsubura goes into the past and she's fighting a kaiju, Tsubura basically explains, okay, here's what the kaiju looks like. And in the present day, Anna has a Monsterpedia book of all the monsters and kaijus that were in the Justice Nova series. She basically explains, okay, based off of your description, the monster that you're fighting is this. Here's its strengths. Here are its weaknesses. Here's what you got to do to beat it. Because they eventually get this device that allows them to communicate with each other through time. So I was like, okay, that's kind of cool, like to have a sidekick like that. So you have a main character who has no knowledge about any of this stuff, but you have another character who does. And so that character pretty much becomes the oracle to Tsubura's Batman. Like she's the one that basically lays out all the information. Here's what you got to do to beat it and stuff like that. The mom character, I think she's kind of terrible. She's an awful mom. As I mentioned before, she said that I'll explain everything later. We're 12 chapters in, she hasn't explained anything. She doesn't explain anything to her daughter. Whenever her daughter questions her, like, what's going on? How am I teleporting into the past? Why am I seeing grandfather? Why am I fighting kaijus? The mom doesn't answer any of those things. She basically becomes a politician and she says everything but the answer. Like she just kind of talks circles around Tsubura until it gets to the point where Tsubura just kind of drops it at the time. I don't know. I'm not really the biggest fan of the mom. I think she's kind of terrible. If my daughter was teleporting into the past to fight giant monsters and I had information on that, I would want to tell her as much as I can. I'll be like, here, honey, here's everything I know about your situation. But no, the mom doesn't do anything about that. In fact, the mom actually just basically finds the tapes of Tsubura's battles, puts them up as lost episodes, and then contacts a lawyer to basically make sure that she gets more rights to the series and makes more money out of it. So she's pretty much making money off of her daughter fighting kaijus. So yeah, kind of terrible. Another thing that doesn't really make much sense is what exactly is Justice Nova? Is it just someone fighting giant kaiju? Is that all it is? Because if that's the case, then this series becomes less like Ultraman and more like Redman. If anyone's unfamiliar with Redman, Redman was a series back in the day. Each episode's like 3 minutes long, and it's just the kaiju fights. It's basically this hero named Redman who fights monsters, and we don't have anything else. Like we don't see him outside of his suit. We don't see like a civilian life. We don't see any actual stories. It's just, here's a guy in a suit fighting a monster for 3 minutes. There's your episode. So is that what the Justice Nova series is? Is it basically just 3 minutes of a schoolgirl fighting a monster and that's it? Or is there like an actual story that goes along with this? How exactly does this work? Because in the past, we see military tanks and fighter jets fighting the monsters. So these monsters are real. Basically, Hideo, the grandfather, he didn't necessarily create this. He's basically just, this is actual events that are happening, and I'm just going to record them. And then later he gets the rights to that. Like, I don't know how this makes any sense. At one point, Tsubura gets involved with Anna's grandmother. And by involved, I mean Anna's grandmother mentions something that happened in her past. And then when Tsubura goes into the past, she sees the grandmother and she saves her life. And when Tsubura goes back into the present day, she sees a memento from that day that that Anna's grandmother has still kept. So these are actually things that happened in the past. So were there actual giant kaijus in the past and the world just forgot about it? That doesn't make any sense to me because this is just 50 years ago. This would be like nowadays if during the 70s there were giant monsters on our Earth and there was a giant person fighting them. And then 50 years later, we all just forgot about that? No way would we forget about that, especially something in the 70s where there's video cameras and stuff like that. I wish this world was explained a little bit more. Why exactly is Tsubura going into the past? How is this series actually being played out? Is it just monster battles or is it an actual series? how is it that the government is involved and there's like a high scale battle? Like we have fighter jets, we have military tanks, we have giant kaiju, something that the government can't really hide. But in the past, it's real life, but in the present day, it's just a TV series. Like, please explain that to me. How does something that happened for real 50 years ago, now everyone just recalls it as something that happened in a TV series? So things like that, I wish were kind of explained a little bit better. But other than that, this is it's a pretty interesting, fun, lighthearted series. So if you're a fan of like Tokusatsu, if you're a fan of Kaijus, a fan of Ultraman, or the Kyodai hero, the giant hero trope, then yeah, check this out. It's an interesting series. It has a lot that I would like for them to clear up, but maybe they will at some points. But until then, it's a fun ride so far. So I'll leave a link down in the description below where you can read it for yourself. But there you go. There's the unwritten rules of romantic comedy and monster extermination. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. Later. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, I still want to thank you for watching it this far, and I hope the next one is more to your liking. With that said, thank you once again, and I hope you guys and gals have a good one. Later.